Hi, I'm Felicia Brooks, and I did my assignment on the Violence Against Women Act of 1994. At the beginning of the 19th century, a woman's legal status in life was directly connected to her husband, brother, or father. By law, she could only expect to be subservient and dependent on these close family members. European settlers who believed that husbands had the God-given right to correct their wives through the use of physical punishment and various forms of domestic violence influenced by the culture of the time. Because a wife was directly connected to her husband, any crime committed by the wife, the husband could take the punishment or would be taking the punishment. So because of that, they believed that a husband had the right to discipline his wife if she did something that he felt could bring punishment onto the family. The laws offered little to no protection for crimes against women. Wife abuse and other forms of family violence was often supported and encouraged by society, expectations, and religious morals. The case of Calvin Bradley versus the state of Mississippi in 1824 was the first of many cases of domestic abuse was decided in the state Supreme Court. The ruling that the husband had gone to excessive lengths to chastise his wife set a precedent for the establishment of new laws favoring women were put into place. By the mid-1800s, wife assault had become illegal in several states across the country, but not everywhere, and was still considered a family matter. And most oftentimes when the authorities were called, the husband was to calm down, and the wife was told to stop doing whatever she was doing to make him mad. So by the time the 19th century arrived, the United States had changed its image completely. Instead of a strong agricultural community, the nation had entered into an age of industry. Along with the new face of the nation, a new family image was also evolving. Men were no longer working at home doing, mechanics and things like that. Like carpentry and those sorts of things. Men were no longer working at home, but seeking outside sources of income, leaving women behind to take care of the home and children. At this time, education was not an option for many women, leaving them again in a lower status of unintelligent, weak, and the little consequences with fewer options for change. Family matters were considered private and intimate affairs that should be resolved behind closed doors. Because of this, even with the new laws protecting wives from abuse, these types of incidents were often unreported because the wives felt they had no rights. So without having anyone to protect them or feeling comfortable enough to be protected, they just didn't say anything to anyone. Women were still not allowed to have their own property or vote in most states. It wasn't until 1920 that the 19th Amendment was passed, guaranteeing women the right to vote. Equal rights were not given to women until 1923. With the rise of the feminist movement, gradually more laws began to emerge that slowly worked to overturn strongly entrenched thinking among many in society. With the passage of the right to vote in 1920, women were gradually being allowed to enter public office, which led to more laws giving additional protection than ever before. By 1986, more laws had been passed. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was in full swing. And while crimes against women have begun to decline, and the statistics show that offenses were still very high, in the 1980s, these issues were now being addressed in Congress. In 1984, the Family Violence Prevention and Service Act was passed, in an effort to prevent more incidents of family violence and to provide shelter to those victimized. And in 1984, Congress passed a major bill, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1984, which the Violence Against Women Act derived from. This bill was known for creating a never-before-seen number of programs focused on assisting law enforcement to fight violent crimes predominantly committed against women. The scope of the law was now reaching far beyond those of family abuse and extending to cover the acts of violence against women. In the 21st century, laws expanded to stop crime against women. Today, the Violence Against Women Act is the largest legal win in fighting crimes against women. Though the law is derived from a number of grants, programs, funding for violence prevention, and prosecutors and things like that, the victim services have been implemented. Whether the crimes are domestic in nature or a stranger assault, the evolution of the law protecting women have moved from those in the private family circle to protect all women regardless of social status, sexual orientation, or relationship to the assailant. So whether or not this is a stranger or your husband or your brother or your son, it protects all of those women. The law was reauthorized in 2000 and again in 2005, whereas protection was extended to battered and trafficking immigrants with enhanced penalties for repeat stalking offenders. It also added programs for American victims, sexual assault victims, and programs to improve the public's response to domestic violence, and training for police officers and all law enforcement agents on how to deal and how to recognize the signs of domestic violence and what could be going on. So the Violence Against Women Act has helped very, very many women and will continue to help women. And hopefully by the time, our kids are grown and having babies themselves and married, the law won't need to exist anymore because we will have cracked down on it. That is the hope. So thank you for listening to my presentation.